Last time, we left off right after Fernando announced he'd joined Ferrari for 2010. Here, we'll talk about the Ferrari years, the comeback to McLaren, and what he got up to when he left F1. Then, we'll analyze his choices and draw a few conclusions. Now let's get back to it. When he joined Ferrari, he couldn't wait to get started. He'd repeatedly called the factory before the season even started throughout the week, every week, to check in on the car, as reported by Domenicali, which also added, Ferrari will never betray Fernando, as what can be taken as a jab towards previous employer McLaren. For 2010, competition would be fierce, with Hamilton and Button in McLaren, Webber and Vettel in Red Bull, Massa and Alonso with the Ferrari, all great drivers in closely matched cars. The team would get off to a fantastic start with a 1-2 at the season opener and would lead the championship until China. Then he'd slide down in the standings due to driver error and slow development of the Ferrari F10. That was until Italy, where a string of good results put him back in contention for the championship. He'd take the lead after the soaked Korean Grand Prix with 2 races to go, but at the last event in Abu Dhabi, he'd pit early to defend position from Mark Webber, who was the closest title rival, a decision that would lead him out into traffic, and since it was the year before and kind of the reason of the introduction of DRS, and the track being Abu Dhabi, he was stuck behind slower cars throughout the race, and losing out in the championship not to Webber, but to Vettel, who hadn't led it all season before that. He'd finished second, 4 points behind the German, in a car that wasn't that close to the top by the end of the year, with more accurate results being shown by teammate Massa, who had 5 podiums and no wins throughout the season, although the Red Bull domination was just getting started. 2011 was a quieter year for Ferrari, who built a more conservative car, leading to the championship never really being in contention for Alonso, with Red Bull and more specifically Vettel being on the podium for every race except for 2 and taking 11 race wins that season. In stark contrast, the Ferrari 150 Italia got just 10 total podiums, including a win at Silverstone, all in the hands of the Spaniard. Well, once again, teammate Massa showed the actual pace of the car, finishing 6th in the championship with less than half the points of his teammate, and with an average finishing position of 6.4 to Fernando's 3.4. The 2012 season is remembered by many things. Some remember it for the 7 different winners in the 7 first races, others by the extremely bizarre win by Maldonado in the Williams at Catalunya, others by Michael Schumacher's last ever podium in what was one of the best podiums in F1 history, and some by the fact that it would be the defining year of Alonso's career, arguably his best ever year in F1, where he didn't put a single foot wrong all season. With far from the best car on the grid, he was the most consistent driver of the year, given to a number of factors from racecraft to adaptability to the new softer Pirelli rubber. He would become the first repeat winner of the season and the driver with the most podiums scored. By the midway point of the season, he was 40 points ahead of the competition, and his only 2 retirements that year were because of racing incidents, where he was just a bystander, like in Belgium with Grosjean ramming his Lotus into the pack, and to a lesser extent in Japan, where he had a coming together with Raikkonen. He did pretty much everything right that season, pushing his car beyond its limits until the last second of their last race, finishing a great second in Brazil, which unfortunately wasn't enough, as Vettel would once again deprive him of the championship by finishing 6th and getting the required points to finish 3 ahead of Alonso. After the race, we would get this iconic picture, which for some is a fun meme template, but many F1 fans know what was actually under the racing suit and the helmet. A man that had given his all and hadn't put a single foot wrong all season, outperforming his car and once again severely outscoring his teammate. He had done all he could, but it wasn't enough. 2012 was the year of the championship that never came, and to this day, people disagree with who was crowned champion. Even many Vettel fans and even Alonso haters can agree on that. For 2013, the Ferrari F138 was great at the start of the season, with Fernando taking a podium at the opening race and being there or thereabouts throughout the first few races. But by the midway point, the car had become a dog. Fernando had already taken his final F1 win without him even knowing, and fittingly it was the Spanish Grand Prix, an emotional race that would be the last of the driver who still had too much to give. Development struggles led Alonso to become irritated and justifiably a bit angry at Ferrari, which had been promising a championship-winning car since 2010, but now, 3 years in, he finished over 150 points behind Vettel, who had taken every single win in the last 9 events. Later that year, he would give a sweeping declaration that was brought up again and again in the coming years, and has never resurfaced as hard as during the 2019 season. Let's just let him tell it.
When he will have a car like the others, If he wins, he will have a great recognition, and he will be one of the legends in Formula One. When one day he has a car like the others and he's 4th, 5th, 7th, these 4 titles will be bad news for him, because people will take these 4 titles even in a worse manner than what they are doing now. So there are interesting times for Sebastian coming.
2014 would be the breaking point between Ferrari and Alonso. After the new regulations were introduced, the Ferrari power unit was so far below the Mercedes in performance that the team finished 4th and Fernando 6th. With just 2 podiums and almost 3 times the amount of points scored by teammate Raikkonen, he was fed up and he was tired and needed some fresh air. Ferrari promised a more competitive car for 2015. But they had been doing the same since 2010. There were negotiations in place for Alonso to move to Mercedes, but Toto Wolff blocked them. After a tour of the Honda Motorsport facilities, Alonso was convinced by Dennis, who had been trying to reel him back ever since Hamilton left for Mercedes in 2013. The move was announced on December 11, 2014. Fernando would join McLaren for the next year, leaving Ferrari after an unsuccessful 4-year partnership. He would hang his red overalls for the last time. A 3-year contract with no opt-out clauses was signed, meaning he was locked in until the end of 2017. McLaren was rekindling the partnership with Honda for the 2015 season after sliding down from championship contenders in 2012 to a midfield team a few years later. It was expected to be a fruitful partnership, but ended up being the biggest disaster in recent F1 history. I've already made a full video explaining everything that you can watch if you want to get the full insight on the team. Here I'm gonna concentrate more on the driver's point of view. The 2015 season got off to a bad start. On the second day of testing, he lost control of his McLaren, crashing at full speed into the wall. He ended up being airlifted to the nearest hospital, but it was ruled that he had a concussion and would therefore miss the rest of the testing and the opening round. On his return though, things didn't go as expected. The McLaren Honda package was not only slow but unreliable. He finished the second round early as he experienced the first of many power unit issues that season. The next 2 races wouldn't yield any points and the following 4 would all be DNFs. After that, he'd go on to score the only points of the season at Silverstone and Hungary, where a 10th and 5th place gave him 11 points, but after that he experienced 3 more retirements while Jenson Button scored a few more points, leaving him outscored by the teammate for the first time in his F1 career. 2016 was an all-around better year. With low expectations, it wasn't hard to be disappointed, but once again Fernando would have a chilling start with his famous crash at the 2016 Australian Grand Prix by trying to overtake Esteban Gutierrez's Haas. He was left with a collapsed lung and wasn't cleared to run at the next event in Bahrain. For the Russian Grand Prix, carnage at the opening lap and a solid and reliable drive gifted Fernando his first points of the season, finishing 5th, 4 positions ahead of his teammate. Throughout the year, Honda's improvements were noticeable, and McLaren had certainly built a great chassis, with the car scoring in 14 more races, with Fernando finishing 10th in the championship, a 7-place upgrade compared to the previous year. But with Honda announcing their change in architecture for the 2017 season, we would learn that everything that has been done until then was for nothing. For the MCL32, the 2017 contender, McLaren had built one of the best chassis on the grid, but was once again held back by the power unit, which promised a serious upgrade of up to 80 horsepower. But its inherent instability meant that McLaren had to run it at -10 compared to 2016, as not to cause the severe engine vibrations that would lead to tons of DNF through the season. He'd retired the first 3 events, wouldn't manage to even start the 4th, and would leave for the 6th to race in the 100th run of the Indy 500, race which he'd lead until more Honda engine problems set him down with 27 of 200 laps to go. He'd then return to F1 for another DNF, a 10th position, 2 more DNFs after that, and a surprise 6th at Hungary once again. A racetrack designed to favor good aero. 4 more retirements with a sprinkle of points would follow. But once McLaren announced they'd have Renault engines fitted to the car from the next year on, Fernando gave them another chance, signing a 1-year extension with the Woking outfit that had gone to finish second to last that season. 2018 started off much better, with the more reliable Renault engine and the fact that the French were interested in working with McLaren. The partnership got off to a great start. Alonso finished 5th on the opening round and said it would be the worst result of the year, but with a car unresponsive to upgrades, it ended up being their best. A string of good results would follow, scoring 65% of all his points that season in the first 5 races, one of which was the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, racing where after having a double puncture, he drove the car back to his pit box, to move up the grid to finish an amazing 7th. He received praise throughout the F1 community for that drive. He had previously stated that the MCL33 would regularly battle with the Red Bulls, but they'd actually finish 357 points behind them in the championship that year. After sliding down the pack throughout the season due to the aforementioned unresponsive car, Alonso left Formula 1 as a driver at the end of the season, with an emotional in-lap and a one-off livery, with drivers like Hamilton, DC and Vettel giving him praise for holding on all those years. He'd leave citing a perceived lack of on-track racing, the predictability of finishing order, and felt that discussions away from racing about broadcasting radio messages among other things harmed Formula 1. After leaving F1, Fernando was far from done with racing. When he was asked what he wanted to do now, he could only come up with more racing. And that's exactly what he did. During his last season, he came to an agreement with McLaren boss Zak Brown to let him drive in 2018 to 2019 in the World Endurance Championship Super Season with Toyota, at the same time as he was racing for the team. He'd go on to win the opening round at the 6 Hours of Spa, followed by the 24 Hours of Le Mans. He'd win, but then be disqualified from the 6 Hours of Silverstone due to ride height infringements, and finish second at the next 2 events in Fuji and Shanghai. For the beginning of 2019, he would race in the 24 Hours of Daytona, when after pressuring the car in front during the rain, he managed to overtake it, taking with his Cadillac the first place trophy. Then the WEC Super Season would continue with 2 wins, one of the 1000 miles of Sebring, another 6 Hours of Spa, and then the final event would be once again the 24 Hours of Le Mans, where he and his teammates Nakajima and Buemi would be crowned champions. He'd then give another go at the Indy 500, but with a crash in practice that would take up longer than expected to fix, and car issues throughout qualifying, he wouldn't be able to make the start. After that, he told Toyota that he was interested in racing at the Dakar Rally at the beginning of 2020, and to do so, he would have to take part in the Rally du Maroc in Morocco, and the Al Ula Neom Rally in Saudi Arabia, with the 5-time Dakar Rally bike class winner Mark Koma as his co-driver. In what he coined as the biggest challenge of his career, he would go on to set a really competitive time for being a rookie, finishing second in one of the legs and 13th overall after he lost many hours with a mechanical issue, losing to his good friend Carlos Sainz, who was very impressed with his fellow countryman's performance. Fernando's commitment to the Dakar Rally and Rally overall is far from over, but in a standstill due to the announcement that happened later that year. He would try Indy once again, but was never comfortable in the car. Added to the clutch issues, he wouldn't fare good there once more. Before the 2020 F1 season had even started, the driver market was in full swing. Carlos Sainz had signed with Ferrari, therefore Daniel Ricciardo would go on to fill that seat at McLaren, and an open spot was left at Renault. This led to wild speculation, and a few names popped up. F2 and Renault Academy driver Guan Yu Zhou, exiled Renault F1 driver Nico Hülkenberg and Fernando Alonso all made the headlines, but after tons of speculation, the news finally broke. Alonso would be making a comeback for the 2021 season, driving alongside Esteban Ocon on the soon-to-be renamed Alpine team. This partnership is already looking quite good, with Renault looking more and more competitive every single race. There's the biggest change in regulations in F1 history coming up, and the team is being run once again by a hot-headed European. In all honesty though, this could actually be something big. With the new regulations and budget cap, I honestly believe that 2022 will reflect on the 2012 season in many aspects, from the variety of teams in contention to the caliber of drivers. I think it's gonna be a tough one between Mercedes, Red Bull, Alpine, McLaren and maybe even Aston Martin. All in all, we can pinpoint the bad decisions taken now that we have the power of retrospective. But then, they seemed rational decisions. For example, the Red Bull contract for 2009 and 2010 is something that is rarely mentioned, but yet might be the biggest missed opportunity of his career. But you have to look at it from his point of view. Red Bull were a midfield team, and recently they had experienced a downturn in performance, going from being 5th in 2007 to being 7th the year after. And looking at the trends, it may have even gone down from there for all he knew. And what was there to stop a 2007 repeat once Vettel joined the big team? If you take a stance from his point of view at the time, you can see that Fernando is a very clever guy. He played his cards to the best of his ability and did what he thought was best for him and his professional career. Sometimes it paid off, like when he spent 2002 not racing and getting acquainted with the team that would lead him to 2 championships. And sometimes not, like when he signed on an experimental project on a historic team that was in a severe downswing with no exit clause. And yes, maybe he could have had 1 or 2 more titles, but these experiences also made him realize what the world of racing is really like, and definitely helped him mature as a person both in and outside the track. in the end of the day, I'm glad to say Fernando is back. Alright, so that can be pretty much it now. Yeah, I actually lied to you before. The reason why I stopped in the middle of the script, let's say, it's not because of time. It was definitely because my computer is a potato, and therefore it definitely couldn't handle editing this whole thing in one go. I had to put up 2 videos, and even this one had to be made in 2 parts for it to be able to be processed. As always, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like if you like the video, and I will see you once more in the next one.